Contrary to popular belief, you don't have to get in the ring to get your hands on these guys. Introducing the Stomp Collection. Sting, Lex Luger, Ric Flair, all the legends of World Championship Wrestling, wherever trading cards are sold.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. My name's Dan, this is Exploder. I'm here with another episode for you and your ear holes. I assure you, nothing sexual was implied by that. And if it is on your end, there's something wrong with you. I like to talk about professional wrestling as it exists in the ring and out of the ring. And sometimes I like to talk about things on the periphery. I like to talk things that help you enjoy wrestling but aren't necessarily stuff that happen inside the ropes. I've done episodes on magazines and hotlines and all these different things, video games and all of that. Stuff that you enjoy about professional wrestling, but there aren't things that happen inside the ring. They don't happen between two people wrestling in spandex, beating the crap out of each other for a belt, or you slept with my girlfriend, or something on a pole. So in this episode, I want to talk about something very unique to wrestling, but something that exists in all sports. That's right, in this episode, I'm talking about pro wrestling trading cards. And I want to talk about its history, how it goes back a lot longer than you think it does, and how it is treated within the realm of professional wrestling, and how it's different from things like baseball cards, but football, basketball, any other sport you can imagine. They have cards, but how pro wrestling trading cards are treated differently, and how they're not, I would say, as respected as other sports, and how their value is not comparable even during their height. So with that in mind, enjoy this episode where I'm going to be talking about pro wrestling trading cards. So we're going to start off with a little bit of history. Now quick, think about how old you think pro wrestling trading cards are. Do you have a year in mind? Are you thinking the 70s, the 80s? You know, the prime, maybe even later on if you're talking about maybe the early 90s. You're wrong. You're wrong by about 100 years. Pro wrestling trading cards technically go back to 1887 as part of the 50-card World's Champion set by the Allen and Ginter Tobacco Company of Richmond, Virginia. Each card was about 1.5 inches by 2 3/4 inches, which is the standard size for these cards. These were tobacco cards. These cards were packed with packs of cigarettes and tobacco as a way to encourage, smoking, because that was what all the cool kids were doing. It spotlighted world champions across 9 different sports, including baseball, oarsmen, boxers, rifle shooters, pugilists, billiards players, and pool players, which are different somehow, and wrestlers, including William Muldoon, at a time where wrestlers were named things like William Muldoon. The front of the card was a artist-drawn representation of the athlete, because that was the standard at the time. It was, photography was a little bit of a new technology that was sort of still all for those new youngsters. The back of the card was unnumbered and had a listing of the other people in the series. Basically, every card was a checklist for the entire series on the back of each card, which is convenient. In some packs, if you ever collected cards, you occasionally would get a card that was just a checklist. This had a checklist for each one to see which one you're missing on the back of each and every card. One card was given as a free premium with each pack of Allen & Ginter cigarettes. And this set is widely considered to be the first significant tobacco card set ever issued. And like I said, it covered different sports. It wasn't just a wrestling or just a baseball, but it all trading cards as we know them start as tobacco sets. And the companies that would rise up, and it sort of split off into different things. And I will talk about in the future, I'll talk about Tops and Fleer and, Upper Deck and all these different things. They all came from a cigarette gimmick. It was a way to sell cigarettes. It was sort of a collect them all type thing, only the product was cancer. Now that seems like a downer, because it is. There were different gimmicks, of course, over time. These would come along, and there would be sets well through, the 50s and 60s. There's really not a big scene on cards in the 70s, as it turns out. Wrestling was popular, but not as mainstream as it would become in the 80s. And it wasn't even really as popular as it was in the 50s. When you saw guys like Gorgeous George or Ricky Starr and this television, the wrestling at the Chase and these things. So it was popular, but in the 70s, it was still popular as a regional thing, and everyone had their own area. But as far as a national trading cards, it really didn't exist. There were different gimmicks done over the years, of course. There are everything from, in 1998, the WCW did WCW NWO talking portrait cards. These things were thick plastic, and there's a button on the corner, you push the button, and then the wrestler that the card is of would talk. A little short sound bite. It was a little gimmicky, it was a little different. It was almost like a toy, but it was different. Now, these were only released at the 19th National Sports Collectors Convention at the Rosemont Convention Center, August 3 through 9th, 1998. Only 1,500 of each card, and this is a handful of cards in the series, and there's only 1,500 of each produced. And it's also notable because Bret Hart's name is misspelled on the back. It's misspelled as Bret, B-R-T-T, and the bio information on the back is also incorrect. So that's something else. If you're wherever you're at reading this, I've included a link where you can actually buy one of these cards. I'm not accounting for the price. This is not an affiliate link. I don't own the card. I just found that you could buy one. I thought that was interesting. If you want to know what one looks like, check it out. If you're one of those people that, if you want to buy it, go buy it. These gimmicks would include a piece of the mat or a ring-worn attire, and then they've done this in other sports. I know, baseball's done this with parts of a jersey. Sometimes they've done like pieces of the leather on a ball or what have you. So that's what wrestling did. Wrestling's done the same thing, and they've included pieces of the canvas, pieces of this or that, or have a thing where maybe a female star had kissed the cardboard supposedly, and they had sealed it. So you're getting a lip imprint or what have you. And if you're a weirdo who likes that kind of thing, go for it. Just don't stalk them. WCW and the WWF, especially in their primes, both had their own. WWF, of course, was a master at marketing. And one time I'm going to do an episode where I'm talking about just the marketing, just the things that they would put their names on, from birthday party sets to foam armor, the Legion of Doom foam shoulder pads, to wrestling buddies, to what have you. The WWF was known for putting their names on everything, but WCW tried at times. In 1990, they had the WCW Slamorama collectible card game, which was a board game that was basically rock, paper, scissors with cards of WCW wrestlers from around that time. I don't know. Everything was a board game back then. The WWF had a VHS WrestleMania game. Don't ask. And in 1991, the WWF did one better, and they released actual playing cards with WWF wrestlers on them, including Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, who, by the way, small little detail here, but it's brilliant, Randy Savage was the king. That's actually pretty smart. Hulk Hogan was the ace. Mr. Perfect was a 7. I'm not sure what that's about. That's kind of weird for me. I mean, I wouldn't make him the queen, but at the same time, anyway. WCW had cards in 1991 by a label called Impel. I actually have a bunch of these. These were a bunch of brightly colored. I mean, if you look at them, they're clearly from the 90s, the early 90s. They are bright as all hell. If you look at one of them too long, you will go colorblind. That's a fact. They're actually really interesting cards. A lot of them are just action shots. They're just like ringside action shots, and they just threw a border on them. And the information on the back is like a little write-up and maybe a catchphrase or something like that. But it's really interesting because these are a good snapshot of WCW at the time, which included the Freebirds when Michael Hayes was teamed with Jimmy Jam Garvin. Big Daddy Dink was their road manager. Dime Dallas Page was managing. Bad Street was with them. It was a very interesting time. The Southern Boys, which of course was one of the Armstrong boys. I believe it was Steve. I'm pretty sure it was Steve and Tracy Smothers. This is the first card of Elegante, so that's something. And it's a 4 Horsemen pre-Sid, right before Sid stabbed Arn, a couple years before that. So yeah, it's also when Sid was wearing a singlet, which was, I don't know, that's just odd. That doesn't look right. And Missy Hyatt when she was still hot. A true time capsule moment. I literally found a bunch of these at a local thrift shop just this year, unopened. I didn't find the box, but I found individual packs unopened. And I had a few, I had about 10 or 15 of the cards at home from when I got them when I was a kid. Not when they first came out in 90, because I wasn't even a wrestling fan in 1991, but I don't know how I came across them, but I came across them. And then I found these random packs at a thrift store just this year. And I didn't buy all they had, but I think I bought 5 or 6, and I have a bunch of them. And I put some of these up, but if I can, I'll get a good picture of them and I'll put them up and show you what they were looking like. For cards, they're fine. They're nice cards. Like I said, they're a good time capsule of WCW at that moment. But you also saw where WCW had the production of Turner Sports, but they weren't what they had become. If that makes any sense. Their production was not there. The gloss, the feel wasn't there. Even from the cards, you got this feel of a regional promotion with Ric Flair, and this was before Hulk Hogan, this was before Randy Savage, this was still, it was WCW, there's nothing wrong with it, but it was just, you could tell it was different from what the WWF was putting out. The WWF, of course, had cards all through the 80s and went into the 90s with different, from Tops to Fleer, which I'm going to get to. They had all these different ones. In 1992, WCW put out a different series. They worked with Tops, who are a huge in the trading card game, but they put them out in the UK. That's one thing you'd also notice from them. They would have regional things. So America, they put out cards. Well, the 1992 set was not put out in the United States. This Topps set was not put out in the United States. It was put out in the United Kingdom. It was, so you would have these things where these cards are basically the 1991 Impel. I mean, they're different pictures, but I mean, if you look at them, they're clearly early 90s. They are, I mean, there's really, and again, if I can find a good picture of these without a huge watermark across them, I'll show them. But that's what these are. These are a snapshot of that time. They're from 1992, but really between 1991 and 1992, there's not a whole lot of difference. But you could tell it was Tom Zink. There was Bobby Eaton and guys like that, and just guys that were really indicative of the company at the time. And it was just released in the European market instead of the North American market. The WWF, of course, would do the same thing. They would have they would work with the company Merlin to release wrestling cards in Germany with a complete set of 180 cards. That's flabbergasting for 180 cards in a European market. Well, at the time where WB in 95 is not doing well here, and in the European market they were doing pretty well. That's where they were doing more tours, so it sort of makes sense. 1995 domestically, as in the United States, the WWF released Action Pact, which I actually bought as a kid. I bought an entire box of this, not just a pack or whatever. I found a box, and I'm gonna date myself here. I bought this box for about $20 in 1995 at a Kmart. That's how old this is. That's how old I am. By this point, I'm like 10, 11 years old, and I bought a box for $25. Now, the base set of these cards, now this is if you have all the base set of cards. Now I'm going to brace you for this. Do you know how much this base set of cards is worth? I paid $20 for it, brand new, 1995. The base set now, in 2019, is worth $25. Truly a great investment. And that's if you have all the base cards and they're in good condition. I'm going to give you a spoiler. I do not, and they are not. The most valuable card in all of it is a promo card for NFL Hall of Famer and awful wrestler Lawrence Taylor, who alone is worth $25, as much as the entire base set combined. Lawrence Taylor's one card, the promo card, is worth more than the entire rest of them. So if you appear at WrestleMania and have Salt and Peppa play you to the ring and then have a bad match with Bam Bam Bigelow where you're huffing and puffing all the way to the ring and out of the ring and everything else, you do that, you can have a card that's worth more than an entire set of other cards. That's the American dream, I think. 1998, WCW Topps had the WCW NWO Series 1, where an authentic autographed Hulk Hogan card from this very set alone is worth $350 on the open market. That's insane. But it's true. But that's true. 1998, Jakks Pacific cards for the WWF, of course, were included with Jakks action figures, which is, you'll see this, there's actually this combination. WCW did the same thing in 1990 with the Galoob line. They did like, the LJNs, the big rubber things that didn't move. The Galoob line were smaller versions of that. And again, I'm going to do an episode on pro wrestling action figures, toys, things like that at a later date. But that's basically the overview. They were these little rubber deals, the LJNs, but they were smaller than the Galoob, and they included these little roster cards. And those things could be collected on their own. They came with the action figure. You'd see this in 1998, the Jakks Pacific cards, including the Legends line, would have their own cards. Those are collectible on their own. And again, this will come up later, but it's a very interesting way to get them both out there and really get them in the hands of kids, I guess. 1999, WCW had cards themselves by Topps, and Topps is a major brand in trading cards. I mean, I'm not the biggest card collector in the world. When I was younger, I collected basketball and football and a little bit of baseball. So I'm not going to sit here and claim I'm the biggest collector of all time, but I do know enough to know the major brands, and I know Topps is a major brand. In 1999, now this is where we're talking about gimmicks, Little Caesars put out lenticular cards for WCW and the WWF. The lenticular ones were the ones that had that rubbery feel on the top and like you would scratch them and make that noise, and you moved them. If you'd move them back and forth, the image would change. So like Goldberg's arms would go up or whatever, or Eric Bischoff would like, you move him, Eric Bischoff's arm would be sending the FedEx. I don't know. Point is, they had these cards, the little lenticular, they came out through Little Caesars, but this is the time where wrestling is as hot as it's ever been, so these little side gimmicks, and this is not a comprehensive list. There's other people who have done stuff like this, other gimmicks, you know, including them in breakfast cereals or magazines or what have you. WCW, believe it or not, I didn't even know this, WCW had their own cards going into 2000 with their WCW magazine limited edition cards, which, like WCW, were gone soon. They also had the 2000 WCW Nitro trading card game. Now, this is one of those weird things they used to do. WWF did this too. They would release cards, but they were based like trading cards, but they weren't meant to be trading cards. They were meant to be played like a card game. So it would be something like, you'd have a card and it would have Goldberg on it, but instead of it just being like a Goldberg card, it would say Goldberg and it'd have like a spear. Like, think of like Dungeons and Dragons for people that aren't that big a nerd. And if you're into Dungeons and Dragons, I'm not insulting you, I'm just stating a fact. Like, there's levels of nerd, and I don't like dragons or oh man, what am I thinking here? I don't like things like Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? It's just not my thing. It's fine if it's yours, it's just not mine, but I'm a big wrestling nerd. So it was this idea of taking that fanaticism and creating a game out of it. The problem was these games never were really that good, and the WWF did it too. It just wasn't the same. It's a trading card game, but they're not trading cards, but they're game cards, but the game themselves aren't that interesting. Oh, you played, you know, the Tongue and Death Grip. That's gonna take 2 from my HP, so you get a 3 count or something. It just never translated. It's something that both companies tried, but it never really translated. And this one I did not know. I don't know where I was on this one, but ECW even had their own cards. I had no clue. In 2000, at their height, unfortunately would be their last calendar year, in the Series 4 Bash of the Brawlers action figure set, they would include 5 random cards with the action figure. And again, I'll get the action figures themselves on a different episode. The cards were packaged random. They didn't necessarily match the wrestler that was in the package. So a little Guido might have a New Jack, Raven, Tommy Dreamer, or what have you cards, Just Incredible, whatever, in it. Each wrestler, as far as the cards go, had 2 trading cards. One was just a headshot and one was a pose stance. So the complete set was 38, with, each wrestler having 2. In 2001, the WWF had a contract with Fleer. Fleer's a name that, again, I knew growing up collecting sports cards. I knew who Fleer was. They're not the big name like Topps is now, but I mean, Fleer was a name you knew at the time. The WWF also used to do something very interesting. They did this from 1995 through 1998, where they would actually include cards in the WWF magazine. And what I mean by that is they would include these sheets of like thin cardboard, and it wasn't thin cardboard, but it's thin like paper stock. It was thin enough to fit in the magazine, but thick enough to feel more than paper. It was like this thin card stock, I guess would be the way to put it. And they would include wrestlers, and you'd have a theme. Say the theme was I remember I have one the theme was Mark Marrow and Sable. So every card would have something to do with Mark Marrow and Sable, and a lot of them were just action shots, stuff from in the ring, or a thing from Raw, like you could literally throw the Raw logo on the bottom and no one would know the difference. But they would put these little frames around them, but they were included in the magazine. So you would open it up, and so instead of a poster, which sometimes they'd also include, but instead of a poster, you'd have this sheet of card stock that was individual cards, and it'd be perforated, so you'd break off the individual pieces, and you'd end up with like 9 cards or 6 cards or what have you, and you'd have those cards. I still have some of those somewhere around the house. I'd have to go look at probably my parents' house. Honestly, I live with my wife in the lovely Exploder studio that I'm in right now. But I'd probably have them at my dad's if I had to go look. They're out there, and they were different. They're very different. WWF currently has a contract with they've done cards from 1985 until now. Their current contract is with Topps, who, pardon the pun, but they are the tops in the industry, so it makes sense that the WWE would have a contract with them. They're putting out cards all the time. Honestly, I haven't seen one of their cards. It's an industry that still exists. It's not something they've discontinued, so apparently they're making money somehow. I don't know. There's even a nostalgia factor. In 2016, PWG put out their own wrestling cards in the style of the 1991 WCW Impel series. for the Battle of Los Angeles. It's a short run. It was a small run. Certain cards right now are worth 30 to 45 bucks on eBay, while others, like Excalibur, is worth like 3. So it's really up and down. I know Cody Rhodes is in that run because he had just came in, and so on and so forth. But they exist, and again, it's a little bit of nostalgia, and so it's always something. The parallel I want to draw here, I want to explain to people. The parallel now is there's a parallel to baseball cards and other ones, but the problem is the way it comes off. Okay, so let me explain. I watched a documentary on Netflix the other day. It's called The Jack of All Trades, and it's about a guy who was a child actor. He's from Canada, from Toronto, Canada, and he was a child actor. And the story, ostensibly, what it's supposed to be about, what he wants it to be about, is the baseball card market. So the baseball card market, everyone used to collect baseball cards. 80s, early 90s, everyone and their mother had a collection. And it starts with being about his collection. And it becomes more about his father started a bunch of card shops called Sluggers, and at the height of the boom, they were doing great. And then his dad, well, without giving too much of the story away, his dad just sold the business and left the business, left the family, the whole thing. And then it becomes more about a personal, but it connects baseball cards. But during it, in the middle of the family drama and dealing with all these stuff that the guy literally is dealing with while they're filming this documentary, he also starts talking about the boom and bust cycle of the baseball card industry. Because baseball cards, other sports have cards, but the baseball card industry was the most unique one. It was the biggest one. The Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card was the main focus, and that for a while was the most valuable one. Or the Jose Canseco cards, or what have you. I never had a Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, but I had other cards from him. Let's put it that way. I had other cards of him. I had other cards of this guy or that guy, Jose Canseco, so to speak. All those guys. And what he talks about is how the industry, it became something where they could just print whatever they wanted. So if they printed a bunch of Ken Griffey Jr. rookie cards, then the value theoretically was, well, we have a bunch of valuable cards. And what actually happened was there was too much in the market. It's like Dutch tulips or anything like that. It saturated the market, and then everything just crashed out of nowhere, gone. Now, why I say it's a parallel, it's not really paralleled so much in the wrestling industry, because there's really no, and I know if someone's really hardcore into it, they're probably gonna blast me and say I'm full of crap, and fair enough. But to me, even from someone who collected cards back in the day, even someone who's done the research on this episode, there doesn't seem to be a real market for wrestling cards, except for rarities, like very rare. Like I said, the aforementioned Hulk Hogan autograph card, $350. In that same series, there's 2 others that are above $100. One of them's Eddie Guerrero, and one of them's Chris Benoit. Do you see what those two have in common? So outside of the rarities, there's really not a market. There's no holy grail of wrestling baseball cards, wrestling trading cards. What the hell? Wrestling baseball. That sounds like a weird game, and I'd play it. But there's really no market as much as there is on baseball. Even now, there's a market for baseball cards, like the big ones, the big cards, the classics, the Honus Wagner, things like that. There's no Honus Wagner for wrestling trading cards. So it was treated differently by fans. I think it's treated differently by the industry. I don't think it's taken as seriously. It's just not the same. It was something that wrestling fans liked, a certain kind. If you were a kid, it's the same kind of, if you liked wrestling trading cards, you were probably buying the wrestling, the action figures from the 90s, with their, stomping action and drop kicks and all those things. You were probably buying those too. I did. I mean, I didn't have a lot of those, but I had a couple, and I had more cards. I had more cards than I had action figures, quite frankly, because cards were cheaper, because I bought an entire box for $20. But that's what it was. It was a thing to get you across and get you as a fan. But it was a kind of thing, if you were a fan, you liked it, and even then, only certain fans. Older fans really didn't care for cards. I don't care. I'm maybe 35 now. 35-year-old, I don't give a crap about cards. Really for any sport, but I certainly don't, and I love wrestling still. I'm not a big sports fan, but I love wrestling. I don't give a crap about cards. I don't give a crap about pro wrestling cards. I don't, it just doesn't appeal to me anymore. So it's a niche market, and then within that, wrestling's already a niche market, and then within that niche market is an even smaller market that still likes cards. So it's parallel to baseball, basketball, football, all those, where the gen into them, and it's probably because of cell phones and digital, and everything's on your phone and everything's on your computer and so on and so forth. But also, while that trims out things like that, it's also the fact that it's wrestling cards, which was never a huge industry to begin with. So if you put it all there, there was never really a big, but like in baseball, there was a big crash. In wrestling, there was no really big crash in trading cards because there was no real boom in it, if that makes any sense. You can't have a crash, you can't have this big bust cycle when there's no boom to begin with. There was no run on wrestling trading cards, so there can't really be a big crash when suddenly your tugboat card isn't worth $50 anymore, it's worth $3. You know what I mean? It was never worth 50. That's why it's not that big of a deal. You can still find a lot of these cards, like I mentioned, from the different series. You can find them on eBay, very cheap. I mean, like, you're gonna get an occasional one, this or that, and a lot of times, unfortunately, the talent they're talking about is passed on. Occasionally, you'll get like I said, you'll get a rarity, you'll get an autograph, or a ring worn, something with the ring worn gear or something like that. But for the most part, they're rather cheap. I'm literally sitting on so many WCW Impel cards right now from 1991. I could mail out probably half of them for free and still have way too many sitting at the house. So I'm gonna get some pictures of those, but I'm gonna show you what I'm talking about. But that's really all for this episode. I just wanted to get that out. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked a little look at sort of behind the scenes, sort of a different look at wrestling instead of just what was going on in the ring. Some of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, but were still interesting. But before I go, I just want to put out a couple shout outs to people that have really helped this page and help this episode in particular. For this episode, I want to direct you to the Pro Wrestling Card Price Guide. I'm going to include a link that goes to their page about the history of wrestling cards. I use a lot of information that, quite frankly, before I started researching this topic, I didn't know a lot about. I knew cards existed, but I didn't know the actual history. And whenever there's something out of my wheelhouse, as far as even in professional wrestling, if there's something that's out of my wheelhouse, I'll go and check with people who actually know what they're talking about and craft that into the story. So check them out. As for Exploder, in a general sense, I want to do a shout out to Jim Richardson. A lot of the pictures you find on Exploder, the memes and everything, I write all the memes. I make them and put them out, but the actual pictures themselves are usually compiled. A lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are compiled by Jim Richardson, and he's been helpful. He's never, honestly, as great as he is, he's put them out on a group, and I'll talk about. He's never asked for any credit, but I want to throw this out to you. A lot of these pictures I quite frankly would never be able to find on my own, so I want to say thank you to him. And also, where I met Jim was through a group called Armchair Icons, and I'm going to include a link there. It's a group of wrestling fans. It's just a very casual group. It's a nice place to go and talk about wrestling, whether it's current or past, and hypotheticals and fantasy booking. It's not mean-spirited. It's not a place where everyone's trying to prove how much they like, how much they know more than the other guy. It's nothing like that. It's a really cool place, really loose, and it's a really fun place. It's a small community to have and to talk to, and I'm there. My name's Dan Fraley, and Jim Richardson's there, and a couple other guys that talk about wrestling. So if you're really interested in having those conversations and don't want to sit there and argue for a half hour why Virgil was actually a great technical wrestler, go to Armchair Icons, and I'll include that link as well. So just a shout out to people that have helped make Exploder what it is today and where a lot of this came from. But until next time, my name's Dan. This is Exploder. Have a good one.